question I often enjoy asking is if there's one significant life lesson that you've learned, what is it? What is the one thing you've learned in life? Perhaps in a really difficult way that you're like, this is a really important lesson for me. What would that lesson be? I often enjoy hearing the answer to this question because for me, when I think of it, I think about how it helps me to navigate through life and say, okay, that's a really significant lesson that I can learn from, that someone else has gone through. And in my experience, when I learn lessons, they're often lessons that I don't want to have to go through again. Now, in my experience, again, many of those lessons I have to keep learning over and over. But there are some significant ones that are so painful. There are some significant ones that are so impacting that once was enough for me. Once was enough, and I say, nope, I don't want to have to experience this again. Today, I'm going to be talking about one of those significant lessons that I've had to learn in life. I'm going to share that with you, and I hope that this will serve you, especially you young men, because one of the things I've never forgotten is how confusing it was for me when I was a young man, how I was feeling so uncertain about how to grow into being a man and what those expectations were. And there were some significant things that I struggled with personally along the way that they contributed to my lack of confidence and my lack of assertiveness in stepping into this season of being a man. I'm not a young man anymore, but I still remember those lessons. I still remember those experiences once upon a time. And I think that's why I'm specifically interested in speaking to you, young man. In fact, I still struggle with trying to understand what it is that would even compel you young men to listen to someone like me. And I say that because, not because I have a small awareness of my worth. I don't. I feel really confident in who I am and how I exist in this world and how I engage and interact with this world. But when I think of myself, I don't think of myself in the typical mold of what culture celebrates as masculinity, and I've done that on purpose. There's so many things about that don't align with me or that don't resonate with me, and so I guess what I'm trying to say is I struggle with why would young men even be interested in listening to me? Why would you young men be willing to listen to me? But it's only recently that I made this commitment to saying I want to speak directly to young men because of a couple of factors. One, just in a really short span of time, I had different individuals coming up to me and saying, you need to speak to young man Binyam. You have something to say and they would really benefit from your experiences and your inputs. So that's one. And then two, it has also been mind-blowing and baffling how the primary group that has actively engaged with me on my platform, especially back in the days when I was driving with Uber and posting content at that time, the primary audience that was highly engaging with my content was young men. It was young men. And even to this day, I still get recognized here in the city of Calgary that I live in, and young men usually, actually it's predominantly young men who just come up to me and express to me their thanks, their gratitude, their gratefulness for the content that I've created. And so I keep wondering, like, what is it? I'm encouraged, but I'm also still not sure. Regardless, I am committing myself, especially in the theme of what I'm investing in right now, talking about integrity. I want to address it specifically to young men. So I guess I'm acknowledging that there is an influence that I may have with young men. And if that is so, I want to put it in the right place. And for me, it's just to challenge and encourage you young men that are listening, especially, what does it look like to grow into being a man of integrity? And so that's why I'm in the midst of this series called The Prerequisites for Pursuing Integrity. That's what I want to inspire you towards. I want to inspire you to pursue integrity in your life, especially in your young years as men. I think there's something so liberating. There's something so powerful about seeing young men who are free and in their power to walk with integrity, to walk with confidence, to walk with a boldness that says they know what they're about and what they're pursuing in life. And so I have a specific challenge for you, young men. I want you to stick around to the end of this conversation to consider if this challenge is meeting you at a time in life when you need to hear it, and step into it. But stick around for this conversation first, because in the midst of this conversation, I am definitely going to be sharing with you my biggest life lesson that I do not want to learn again. And today's topic, today's prerequisite that we're exploring, especially in relation to pursuing integrity, it's specifically in relation to honesty. We're talking about honesty today. Honesty is my big lesson in life that I wish I'd learned when I was younger. And young men, I don't want you to learn this lesson in the painful way that I had to, because it's brutal. Like my story, my experiences, in my perspective, it was brutal. The amount of loss that I experienced along the way was brutal. The pain that I inflicted was brutal. And so, here's my experience. Here's me as a fellow traveler in this journey of life, young men. I'm not one who's better than you, but I think, young men, I am one who's a little bit further in this journey than you are. And I've learned to find wisdom in the experiences of others who have gone to places and experienced things that I haven't, so I can maybe skip some painful things along the way in life, and I'd love to share with you one of mine. But let's talk a little bit about honesty today and why that is supremely important, a prerequisite for pursuing integrity. In fact, I'll put it in a really bold way. Let me put it in a bold way. I would say, one, that it is impossible to have integrity if you don't have honesty. If you're not committed in any way to honesty, you'll never reach integrity. You'll never be within a stone's throw distance from integrity. Integrity is critical, it's crucial, it's necessarily a prerequisite for one who's wanting to pursue integrity. And then secondly, I'd want you to know that this doesn't happen overnight. We live in a time when there is this, and I buy into it, there's this lack of patience. We want everything like right now. We want instant gratification. And as I encourage you, as I challenge you to pursue integrity, it's not going to happen overnight. It's a lifelong process that's going to take massive amounts of effort on your part to be consistent on a daily basis for a lifetime. Even to this day, like I've only been in this journey for a few years now, where I'm pursuing integrity, and it's a daily thing for me. It's a daily thing, and it's a moment by moment as I'm faced with choices and decisions and scenarios. Each moment, it's like, how do I walk with integrity through this? It's not like once you have it, you're done. You don't have to pursue. It's like an ongoing pursuit. Even now, while I'm in the midst of where I'm currently at, with all my familiarity and my confidence in walking with integrity for the past 7 years, it's still a commitment for me to still strive for it on a daily basis. So it's not a once you got it, you're done. It's more like an ongoing, I'm still in the game. I'm still working towards this. Pardon me while I just blow my nose. I get emotional sometimes when I'm talking about things that really matter. I hope you don't mind that, because that is something I'm unapologetic about. It's actually an important part of my expression to say all emotions are worthwhile expressing. And I want to model and normalize what that looks like for us as young men, to be emotional, to have tears, to be able to express vulnerability. I want to model what that is and reclaim that for the masculine side, so we don't have to buy into the unhealthy perspective that says men don't show emotions. Hogwash. Give me a moment here. Excuse me. So, in honesty, yes, it's a really critical one. I would say the fundamental element of pursuing integrity, the fundamental element to set you on this path towards integrity, is the practice of honesty. It's definitely a prerequisite for integrity. It's a foundation on which integrity is built. You need to hear that again. Honesty is the foundation upon which integrity is built. Let me say it a third time because that's so important. Honesty is the foundation on which integrity is built. Honesty is simply the act of being truthful. It's being transparent and sincere in all of your dealings in life. Now, honesty helps to guide people in general, but I'm specifically speaking and addressing young men. Young men, honesty is going to help guide you to the right decisions in life. And this is really critical because you're going to face many challenging situations and scenarios if you already haven't. And I'm sure most of you have. You know that this is one of the maxims in life, that life is full of struggle. It's going to be like so difficult to figure out which is the right way to go in this scenario. How do I navigate through this complexity of life? And when you don't have that kind of confidence, it gets to be really uncertain. How do I choose? Which way do I go? How do I be decisive in which pathway I need to be taking? Well, dear friend, honesty is going to help you to make those right decisions. Because as you face the many situations that are challenging, that are required to make choices, it's in these settings that honesty is going to help you discern and say, okay, here's the right way. How does it do that? Honesty is doing right even when no one's watching. So you're going to be faced with those decisions and choices when no one's watching and when they're watching as well. But as you're able to apply honesty, something else that comes in here is that you need to first of all know yourself well enough to be able to act honestly, to be able to engage honestly with the opportunities you have to make choices that are really challenging. First and foremost comes the necessity that you need to be honest with yourself. It's hard to make choices if you don't know where you're coming from or what really matters to you first. It's hard to be honest with those choices that you have to make in life if you've not already done the prerequisite work internally. It's difficult to make choices externally if you don't know the source from which it's coming from, which means that you need to do some internal work for yourself. So let me just address this really important point. Honesty is not only about telling the truth, but it's also about being truthful with yourself. So before you can be truthful externally with others and in those opportunities to make choices, first and foremost, dear young man, you need to figure out who you are. You need to be able to understand, what do you stand for? What are your beliefs and values and principles? If you don't have a clear understanding of who you are and what you stand for, it's really hard for you to make choices in life. It's really difficult for you to be able to, with confidence and boldness, say, here's the pathway I'm going to go. Here's the choice I'm going to choose. You can't do that if you don't know yourself. And unfortunately, for most people in life, young men, even grown-ups, even those who are old, those who've not invested in getting to know who they are continue to struggle with this for a lifetime. You'll see them continuing to be indecisive. You'll see them being inconsistent in the way they apply themselves to their course of life. When you don't invest in knowing who you are, if you don't invest in being first and foremost honest with yourself, it's difficult for you to engage externally with the world, because most of our decisions come from internal motivations. They come from internal commitments that we've made to ourselves. So it is really important for you to have a clear understanding of yourself. But I said in my title, this is Honesty, a Prerequisite for Pursuing Integrity, a young man's guide. And I want to guide you in this process because I just don't want to suggest something and leave you to figure this out for yourself. So here's a guide for how you can first and foremost start to knowing yourself. Listen up, young man. To know yourself and understand yourself well enough so you can actually make choices that are being honest with you and who you are. Here's how you can begin. First of all, take some time for yourself. You're going to need some time for yourself. Take some time without any distractions. Carve time away where you can walk into your own room maybe, or just a quiet zone so you're alone with you and your own thoughts. Just make time for yourself. First point, where there's no distractions. Put your phone away, put your gaming away. This is you investing in yourself right now. And as you take time, introspect. What do I mean by this? Look internally. Look inside you and start getting familiar with what makes you you. And when I say look inside you, it doesn't mean cut yourself up and look inside your organs. No. I mean, look inside your mind. Consider and reflect what's going on there. Consider what emotions you're experiencing. Consider just what it feels like to be you in your body. Consider what it feels like to be presently as you are. Like, consider how you can start getting familiar with what does it mean to be me? Oh my goodness, I didn't realize how talkative I am in my mind. And usually this conversation, I'm just giving you an example, by the way. This conversation that's going on in my mind right now, it's really like awful. Like, I'm saying some terrible things to myself or about myself. Or it could be like, isn't it interesting how I just keep on wanting to think about this? This must be important to me, you know, or that's what introspection is. It's just kind of like doing a deep dive internally and considering. And as you're considering and being aware of what's going on internally, you're reflecting, you're saying, what does this mean though, that I think about this, or that I'm feeling this, or that I'm pondering or exploring or curious, or like, what do all these things mean as you do a dive into yourself? Only you have access to what's going on in here. Taking time to do this, not once, but on an ongoing basis, so you can get to know who you are. This is what it means for you to begin this process of understanding who you are and what you stand for. This is the beginning of you being honest with yourself. You're taking time out to look at yourself as you currently are in this moment, and you're applying yourself, saying, I'm going to be honest. Oh man, I usually think about this. I hope no one ever finds out, but man, at least it's good for me to know that this is important and that I'm interested in this, for example. That's the beginning of being honest with yourself. And then as you're continuing to take observations, move into a different zone as well. Like, not only take an assessment of, here's me just sort of passively watching what's going on inside of me and what I'm experiencing, but then also start asking yourself a few more questions about things like, what do you aspire to? What do you want? What are you inspired by? What do you want to achieve? What do you want to believe? What do you value? So maybe ask some specific questions like this. What is it that I really enjoy? What do I love in life? Like, what do I really find myself like engaging with enthusiastically? What are further some of my strengths that I can identify? Like, what am I really good at? How can I acknowledge that with honesty? And there's a way of being honest about like acknowledging your strengths without feeling like you're being boastful or arrogant. No, there's a way of saying, oh yeah, there is that. I'm really good at this. I think I do this really well, for example. I do really well when someone compliments me. I can reject the option of responding with false humility, saying, oh, it's nothing. No, instead I'll say, do I resonate with that? Yeah, I do. That's me doing introspection. And then I say, thank you. I acknowledge their compliment and I appreciate that. No, it took me a lot of work to work on this and I'm really grateful I have it too, but thank you for acknowledging and observing that this is there, you know? So there's a way of actually responding to your strengths that doesn't reek of arrogance and you know, that sense that you're better than others. There's a way of receiving and acknowledging that you have strengths with humility. And then conversely, consider where your weaknesses are. What are those areas that you still struggle with? You're like, this is an ongoing point here that I'm struggling with. Well, what does that look like? And then as you consider not only your strengths and weaknesses, but also then look at what your core values are. What are the things that really matter to you? What have you been brought up believing? Are those still things that you resonate with? Or do you have a different set of core values now that you're starting to adopt that are different from where you grew up? How can you be honest about those? And even go a little further and say, what are those things that motivate you or that inspire you? These are ways of you getting to be honest with yourself and understanding what really matters to you. And as you understand these things internally, it now enables you to have the skills to engage externally with those around you and scenarios and situations that seem really complex. So when things come up, you can be honest and saying, actually, no, I'm not interested in fishing because I don't like fishing. Instead of saying, I guess, you know, like there's a way that you can apply honesty that is driven from internal awareness and a clear understanding of oneself to be able to say, here's what matches with me outside. That's really important. Now remember, this is a lifelong process, so be patient. I'm going to say this over and over. This is a lifelong process, dear young man. It's a lifelong process, so patience is necessary. Don't berate or beat yourself up because you haven't figured this out in a day. Give yourself time to walk into this. Give yourself time to start incrementally growing in this category of expressing honesty. Asking these fundamental questions are going to help you have a good framework of how to understand yourself and your perspectives. The other thing you could do as well in getting to know yourself or expanding your experience, because I know that was one of my challenges, is how can you have some new ways of experiencing challenges where it helps you to grow and stretch. And you could do this by exposing yourself to different experiences and different perspectives, talking to people who don't necessarily think like you, interacting with different communities from around the world in your own town or city, getting to know them. Volunteering in certain settings is a great way of expanding that. Traveling, if you have the ability to travel or the option to travel, what an amazing way to experience self-awareness as you're growing and changing. And then also reading. I know a lot of young men don't read today, but reading is a fantastic way. If you're not a reader, consider audiobooks, because here's where someone has put all their best thoughts into one little compendium that enables you now to pick the best of their thoughts that you want to imbibe for yourself and grow. And so that's another fantastic way of growing. If you have some requests of what would be good books to read, I'm happy to suggest some that have really impacted me and helped me grow. So let me know in the comments if that is something that would serve you well and you'd be interested in, but I'd be more than happy to do that. And then you could also seek guidance from those who know you well, that you trust and that you find safe. Ask them saying, hey, what are some observations about me that you have come to see that I could benefit from knowing, both the good and the challenging, because I want to grow as an individual. This is a way of how we grow, to be honest with ourselves first and foremost. But let me hasten on so that this does not extend unnecessarily too long. Honesty is implemented as we build trust over time. In building honesty and consistency in being truthful with others, we start to build credibility with others, and they start saying, okay, this person, they are true to their word. They keep their word. They are regular. They're consistent in this way. They can be trusted. They're reliable. So it really requires that you be truthful, not once in a while, but all the time. Make this a habit. Make this a pattern in your life. If you're only honest once in a while, it's not going to be plausible. It's not going to be people are not going to necessarily find you credible. They're not going to find you trustworthy. They're not going to find you reliable. It takes being consistent in this, in all of your commitments. Imagine another scenario. For some of us young men, we're honest in some parts of our life, but not in others. So we might be honest with our buddies, we might be honest with the people that we spend time with, because there's that level of trust. But let's say you have a relationship, you may choose to be dishonest there because you don't want your partner, your romantic partner, to get to know all the things that you're involved in. Well, that's being inconsistent, isn't it? You're being honest in one category, but not in another. You might be honest at work all the way, because you really care about the work that you do, but you might be dishonest at home in the way you're dealing, or among, in different settings. That's inconsistency there. What does it look like for you to be honest right across the board in every sphere of life? It's really important that you are committed in all your engagements to be honest. Honesty demonstrates integrity, which builds strong relationships, and you can infuse more honesty in your life by keeping your word. If you say something, commit to it. Commit to things that are going to enable you to grow, and then follow through by being honest in your engagement of them. When you're wrong, admit your mistakes. Say, I was wrong in this. We're not designed to be perfect as human beings. So it's not a bad thing, young man, to be able to get used to saying, I was wrong. I'm sorry. It's unusual for most in culture to see this from young men. Why don't you blow them away, young man, by your commitment to honesty in being willing to admit when you were wrong and to seek to make amends? That's mind-blowing. Take responsibility for those things that you've done wrong and that you need to attend to and make things right again. This is being countercultural today. This is being countercultural, and I would challenge you to step up in this way. Integrity is... This last point, let me just get you to listen carefully here. Let me just grab your attention in case you're zoning out here. Integrity is the ultimate goal for you as young men to strive for. Let me say that one more time. I believe integrity is the ultimate goal for you young men that you should be striving for. It's a state of being whole and complete. It's a state of being honest, truthful, and reliable. It's a state of being whole and complete. It's a state of being honest, truthful, and reliable. It's a state of being whole and complete. It's a state of being honest, truthful, and reliable. It's a state of being whole and complete. It's a state of being honest, truthful, and reliable. It's a state of being honest, truthful, and reliable. It's a state of being honest, truthful, and reliable. It's a state of being honest, truthful, and reliable. It's a state of being honest, truthful, and reliable. It's a state of being honest, truthful, and reliable. It's a state of being honest, truthful, and reliable. It's a state of being honest, truthful, and reliable. It's a state of being honest, truthful, and reliable. It's a state of being honest, truthful, and reliable. It's a state of being honest, truthful, and reliable. It's a state of being honest, truthful, and reliable. It's a state of being honest, truthful goodness, I still remember when I didn't feel whole. It was a terrible experience when I didn't feel whole because I felt so displaced. I felt so divided. I felt like I had so many things going on that I just couldn't bring everything together so I could be me. And that was just because of my life dishonesty that I had cultivated for such a long time. But integrity comes from this word in Latin called integer, and which it just means whole. And so this idea, this concept of integrity implies that you could actually experience being whole, that you don't have to feel divided. You could actually be who you truly are without having to divide yourself for this community and this context and this setting. And you don't have to do all that because that's so exhausting and that's so depleting. But what does it look like for you to walk with integrity whereby you can be who you are on purpose all the time? That's possible, young man. Integrity does not happen overnight. It is lifelong and requires massive effort. And it is possible for you to experience this sense of integrity, this sense of wholeness, and in an alignment where your values, your commitments, your convictions align with your actions and your values, especially when you apply yourself to being consistent in life. It's not possible to have integrity without honesty. Therefore, it is critical, it's crucial that we start maintaining a consistent habit of being honest in all of our commitments in life. Integrity isn't just a virtue, but it's a way of life that really helps you to become a better version of yourself. I promise it's going to finish off with my painful story. Let me just finish off briefly with my painful story. This is the one lesson, this whole conversation here that I'm sharing with you. I really wish I'd had this when I was younger. I really wish I'd had someone older who could have sat down with me, the way I'm sitting down with you today, to say, this is really important. I would have saved a good decade and a half, maybe 2 decades of pain if I'd only had someone sit down with me and say, here's what it means to be honest, and here's the opportunity you have to pursue honesty in your life. For me, because I wasn't honest, let me tell you why I wasn't honest in the first place. I wasn't honest because I was afraid of what people would think of me. I was bound by the fear of others and what they would think of me. So I codependently tried to figure out what I thought people expected from me, and I tried to do that, regardless of if it aligned with my values. So I wasn't being honest with myself in the first place. And not being honest with myself, I was making a lot of my commitments externally, not based on internal convictions, but saying, I need to figure out what their expectations are and do that. And I didn't feel any sense of wholeness. I felt so divided. I didn't have integrity. I didn't feel whole. I was really good at this. I became really good at doing what was expected from me, but I never knew who Biniam was. And as I started to become dishonest with myself in doing things that didn't really jive or resonate with here, like my internal values, I was in essence being dishonest with all those around me. And I started cultivating this persona that everyone loved because they thought they were buying into something that I was presenting that wasn't really true. And this consistent dishonesty for years kept building up. You know what it's like when you keep on building a small lie and a small lie, and eventually it's like pretty huge and you have to do a lot more work to keep it up, to the point that at some point you're like, I don't even know who I am anymore. And if people were ever to discover this mountain of lies that I've been building up, this dishonesty that I've been basing my whole life on, they're going to be shattered because they thought they were building some trust, and really that they were trusting in something that wasn't true. And as a result, I hurt so many people. In the midst of it, in the midst of me and my dishonesty, I built up so much trust with others because they thought they were buying into a version of me, and they were like, oh man, you're the most trustworthy person we've ever met, and that kind of thing. Even I met a girl, a beautiful girl, and got into a relationship and eventually got married and had kids with her too. Again, on this premise of dishonesty, because I was so afraid to speak honestly. And I kept on building the lies. I kept on pursuing this dishonesty. And it was at some point, I reached a breaking point. And I've mentioned this story in past video. But I reached a breaking point where I just couldn't do it anymore. And I didn't like what I was seeing of who I was. I didn't like what I was seeing of where I had arrived and come to. So my path to integrity just involved me ripping off the band-aid and just being upfront and honest with everyone. Everyone, from my wife to my kids. That's one of the reasons that I'm divorced now. And it carried on even to so many friendships and connections and people that I had influenced and impacted for amazing, like we'd had amazing connections, but again, it was based on dishonesty, and they deeply felt hurt as well. And I lost all of that, lost it all because I wasn't dishonest. Because I was dishonest and I wasn't choosing the path of integrity by being courageous to speak my truth. And so this is the lesson I don't want to learn again. I don't want to learn this again. And that's why I'm speaking to you young man. I don't want you to experience this pain. And I'd rather for you to experience something totally different. I'd rather for you to experience something redemptive. I would rather see you in your power from a very early age so you can actually make some fantastic progress and have amazing experiences in life instead of the painful ones that I have as my memories. So this is my lesson that I would say I don't want to learn again. I share it with you. And I include it in this series of prerequisites for pursuing integrity, because that's what I'm all about now. This is a commitment for me because of painful experience. I'd rather it be for you one where you're like, I'm thankful I didn't have that kind of a painful experience, and I'd rather learn before ever experiencing those. That's why I'm beckoning and calling you to walk with integrity. So my challenge to you is, are you ready, young man, to commit today to being habitual in being honest with yourself and the world around you? I'm asking you this, consider for yourself. Take this into your own space where you need to just reflect on it. Are you ready to give up on living a life of lies and dishonesty, whereby you are increasing the collateral damage of people you're going to hurt because of those lies and the mountain of dishonesty you're heaping like I once did? Or are you ready to say, enough of that? I want something different today. I want to make a commitment to start practicing. Remember, it's not a once in a moment sort of, and then you're there. It's more like a habitual progression. You're going to fumble along the way should you make this commitment. But my question is, are you ready to make this commitment today? Are you ready to step up and commit yourself to walking with honesty, regardless of the cost? Because in doing so, you're going to find yourself, you're going to feel a sense of healing and wholeness starting to take effect in your life. If that is you, I would love to hear from you. Drop me a comment down below. If you haven't already done so, I would love for you to subscribe, because I would love to see you joining this community of those who are impassioned and inspired to pursue integrity and all of its challenging demands on our life, because they are for good. We're talking about how can we be better versions of ourselves so that we can experience a lot more fantasticness in this lifetime. I want to paint a picture of what that could be like for you, but it entails that we have some work to do first and foremost. My dear listener, it's been a very long video already. I'm going to bring it to a close. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you hadn't guessed, this is a pretty important subject to me, and I'm quite passionate about it. But in me sharing my passion with you, my intention is that I could also inspire you for what could be in your own walk with integrity. And honesty, like I said, is critical. You can't arrive at integrity if you haven't been building on the foundation of honesty. Walk alongside me and let's do this journey of life together. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video. If you haven't already done so, do subscribe, like, and comment. I would love to connect with you. Chat soon.